Hey, my name is Ben Kowalski. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized civil engineering firm called Harmon and Associates, out of an office on the second floor of a converted warehouse building on the west side of Madison, Wisconsin. What a structural engineer does, stripped down to its plainest form, is this. I determine whether things will hold. Bridges, parking decks, building frames, retaining walls, the concrete foundations of houses that are about to have a second story added. People hire us when something new is being built, or when something old is being questioned, or when something happened and nobody is quite sure yet why. My job in every one of those situations is to look at what is actually there, not what the plans say, not what someone assumes, not what the building looks like from the outside, and determine what it can bear and what it cannot. My father was a contractor. He built houses from the ground up for 30 years in the Fox Valley area, and he had a way of looking at a finished framing job, just standing in front of it, hands on his hips, reading it. That was better than any instrument I have used in graduate school or since. He retired 6 years ago, and the thing he misses most, when I ask him, is not the work itself, but the moment when you finish the framing and the whole skeleton of the thing is visible, before any of the surfaces go on, and you can see exactly how it's built and whether it's right. He said the surfaces going on always made him a little sad, because that's when you stop being able to see whether you'd done it correctly. I have thought about that in other contexts more than he probably intended. I wake up at 6. I'm in the office by 7:30 or at a site by 8, depending on the week. The work is methodical and consequential, in a way that I find satisfying without being able to fully explain why. There is something about knowing that the numbers you sign off on are the numbers a building will actually use that keeps the work meaningful even on the days that feel routine. I eat lunch at my desk or in my truck. I leave by 6 most evenings, sometimes later. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house on Farwell Avenue that I bought 4 years ago because the bones were good and the price reflected the surface condition, which needed work. I have done most of that work myself, which my colleagues find both unsurprising and slightly exhausting as a topic of conversation. I am not someone who talks about himself easily. I know that. I have been told that, in specific terms, more than once, by people who were not wrong. What I do instead of talking about myself is show up on time, do what I said I would do, and notice things that other people tend to miss. This is a useful set of qualities in structural engineering. It has been a more complicated set of qualities in everything else. 3 years ago, I was with a woman named Diane, who was kind and capable, and who eventually said, plainly and without malice, that being with me felt like standing in front of a beautiful building she was never allowed inside. I asked her what she meant. She said she was never sure what I actually thought about anything, and that the uncertainty was exhausting. I said I thought she was right that I wasn't communicating enough. She said that was exactly the kind of thing she meant. We parted on good terms. I thought about what she said for a long time and understood it, and did not know what to do about it until somewhat recently. My friend Marcus has been trying to set me up with someone for approximately 2 years. Marcus is 38 and has been married for 9 years and has the specific evangelical quality of someone who is happy in a thing and wants everyone to have it. I had declined every previous attempt, which Marcus found baffling and attributed to fear, which I disputed, which is an argument we have had in some form approximately a dozen times. On a Thursday evening in early June, he called and said he had someone he wanted me to meet. He said her name was Leah, that she was a friend of his wife's from graduate school, that she was thoughtful and sharp, and that she would like me if I gave her a reason to. He said she was getting married in 9 days, I said that was relevant information he had buried. He said she wasn't happy about the engagement, and that she needed to meet someone worth being unhappy for. He said this with the particular confidence of a man who has thought about this more than he should have. I said this sounded like a situation I was not equipped to be part of. He said I was the most equipped person he knew for exactly this situation, and that I was also overthinking it, and it was just dinner. I almost said no. Marcus pushes in the specific way that close friends push, which is with information about you that you didn't give him permission to use, and I was not comfortable with the framing. A woman 9 days from her wedding meeting a stranger for dinner was not a low-stakes situation, and I was not interested in being someone's reason for a bad decision. I told Marcus that. He said, "Ben, she's looking for a reason to trust her own judgment. She's not looking for a rescue. She just needs to see that the thing she's been telling herself is possible actually exists." I sat with that for a moment. "One dinner," I said. "One dinner," he said. I thought about it for another moment. "I'm going to text her first," I said, "before we meet. So it's not a cold introduction." Marcus gave me her number. I thought about what to say for longer than I would admit. What I eventually sent was this: "Hi, I'm Ben. Marcus says we're meeting Saturday." I wanted to say hello first. No pressure on any of this. I know the timing is complicated. She replied in about 10 minutes. "Thank you for saying that." Saturday works. I put my phone down and went back to the load calculations I'd been working on and did not think about Leah Tran for the rest of the evening, which was only partially true. She walked into the restaurant on Saturday at 7:15 in a wedding dress. Not the full cathedral train. A simpler one. Fitted, ivory, just above the knee, with a small row of buttons at the cuff that I noticed, because several of them were undone, and her hair was half out of whatever it had been in, and she was carrying her shoes in her left hand and her phone in her right, and she was looking at the room with the expression of a woman who has recently run through a parking lot and is still deciding whether running was the right decision. She saw me. I was the only person in the restaurant sitting alone at a table for two, looking at the door. She crossed the room. She sat down. She set her shoes under her chair and her phone on the table, and she looked at me, and she said nothing for a moment. I did not say you're in a wedding dress. I did not say what happened. I did not do anything that would make her explain herself before she was ready to. I said, "Do you want water or something stronger?" She said, "Both." I flagged the server. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. She had the remnants of very careful makeup, the kind you wear to a wedding, your own wedding, and her hair still had pins in it in places and loose in others, and she was sitting in the specific posture of someone who has been holding something very heavy and has just set it down and is not yet sure of the ground under her feet. "I'm Leah," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm Ben." "I know," she said. "Marcus told me what you look like." "He described me?" I said. "He said you'd be the one who looked like he was paying attention," she said. The water and a glass of wine arrived. She drank the water first. She looked at me over the rim of the glass with the specific directness of someone who has spent the last several hours making large decisions and has run out of patience for small ones. "The wedding was today," she said. "I figured," I said. "I got to the venue," she said. "I was in the room. I had my flowers. Everyone was there." She paused. "I read your text while I was waiting to go in." I looked at her. "The one where you said no pressure," she said. "Where you said the timing was complicated." "It was just an introduction," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why it mattered." She set the water glass down. I had been telling myself for 8 months that what I was feeling wasn't real, she said. That I was nervous, that everyone is nervous, that Marcus was wrong and I was wrong, and the feeling would go away once I was actually in it. And then I read a text from a stranger who said no pressure. I know the timing is complicated. And I thought, she stopped. I thought, that's what it sounds like, she said, when someone means it. She looked at me. I left him because of what you texted me, she said. She said it quietly, not as an explanation or an accusation, as a fact that she was still arriving at the full understanding of. I did not say anything for a moment. What did you tell him? I said. The truth, she said, that I wasn't sure I should be there, that I had been not sure for a long time, and that I had been talking myself into it instead of talking to him about it. She paused. He wasn't surprised. That was the worst part. He wasn't surprised. What did you do after? I said. I walked to my car, she said. And then I thought about going home, and I thought about what going home was going to feel like, and then I thought, I told Marcus I'd have dinner with his friend. And I drove here. She looked at the menu she hadn't opened. I know how this looks, she said. It looks like someone who made a hard decision and didn't want to be alone on the other side of it, I said. She looked at me. Something moved in her expression, not the directness, which didn't change, but something behind it that shifted. That's a very specific and accurate thing to say, she said. It's what I see in front of me, I said. Most people would say something reassuring. She said, I don't know you well enough to know what's reassuring, I said. I can only tell you what I observe. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Marcus said you were like this. Like what? I said. Like someone who says the actual thing, she said. He says that about me? I said. He says you're the most honest person he knows and that you keep it to yourself too much, and that those two things are connected. She paused. He's not wrong, is he? I looked at her. Probably not, I said. She picked up the menu. We ate dinner. The restaurant was not remarkable, but it was warm and the food was good, and the particular quality of the evening, a woman in a wedding dress and a structural engineer, and the specific unlikely reality of a Saturday in June, had produced a kind of social pressure that, once you stopped fighting it, turned out to be almost freeing. There was nothing normal about the situation. There was therefore very little performance possible. We were just two people at a table, and whatever we were going to be, we were going to have to be, actually. She was a pediatric occupational therapist. She worked with children who had sensory processing difficulties and developmental delays, which she described with the particular clarity of someone who has learned to explain complex work to parents who are scared and need to understand what is happening with their child. She had a way of watching things. I noticed it when she was looking at the room and when she was looking at me, that had the quality of professional attention, the kind you develop when you are paid to notice what other people miss. She had been engaged for 14 months. His name was Doug. She described him in terms that were neither angry nor affectionate, in the flat factual register of someone rendering a fair assessment, smart, stable. Her parents loved him. Good on paper, in most of the ways good on paper means. She said she had loved him and was not sure she had ever been in love with him, and that she had spent 14 months confusing those two things because it was easier than examining the difference. The building looked right, I said. She looked at me. Sorry, I said. Occupational habit. I mean, from the outside, the structure looked sound. The structure looked sound, she said slowly. Yes, that's exactly it. The problem with structural failures, I said, is usually not that the materials were bad, it's that the load was misapplied. Something was being asked to carry weight it wasn't designed for. She was quiet for a moment. "He's a good man," she said. "He deserved someone who was sure." "So did you," I said. She looked at her hands, the undone buttons at her cuff. "I have been sure about very few things in the last year," she said. "The work, my family, a couple of friendships that are genuine, not much else." "What made you sure about those?" I said. She thought about it. "They didn't require me to stop listening to myself," she said. I understood what she meant. I noted it the way I note things in the field that are relevant, but whose full significance I don't understand yet. Carefully, in the part of my mind that stays with things until they become clear. She asked me about the work, about what structural failure actually looks like before it announces itself, about whether you can always tell. I told her about the signs, the hairline cracks in specific locations, the movement in joints that shouldn't move, the corrosion patterns that tell you the timeline better than any inspection report. I told her about a parking structure I had assessed 4 years ago that looked completely intact from the surface and had a concrete deck that was 12 millimeters away from a failure condition at the point of maximum load. I told her the owner had argued with my assessment for 2 months and then gotten a second opinion that confirmed it and called me back. "What did you say?" she said. "I said I was glad they called," I said, "and that we should get started on the repair plan." "You weren't angry that he doubted you?" she said. "The building didn't care that he doubted me," I said. "It was still 12 millimeters from failing." She looked at me for a moment. "You are like this," she said. "The way Marcus said." "I don't know what I'm like," I said. "I know what I'm trying to be." "What are you trying to be?" she said. "Accurate," I said, "about everything that matters." She was quiet for a long time. Outside the restaurant window, Madison was doing its early summer Saturday thing, people on the street. The sky still light at 8:30, the specific ease of a city that has been cold for a long time and is grateful for warmth. "I think I need to go home," she said. "I need to call my parents, and I need to talk to Doug again, and I need to sleep. I've been making large decisions all day, and I'm running low." "That seems right," I said. She looked at me. "Can I?" She stopped. "Can this not be the only time we do this?" she said. "I know it's strange to ask. I know the circumstances are. Call me when things are less immediate," I said. "Take whatever time you need. My number is the one Marcus gave you." "You're not going to say anything about the dress," she said. "I wasn't going to," I said. "Why not?" "Because the dress is a fact about today," I said. "You're not just a fact about today." She put her shoes back on. She stood up. She looked at me from the other side of the table with the direct, steady expression she'd had since she walked in. But something had changed in it. It was less defended. The way a face goes when the thing it was bracing against didn't turn out to be what it feared. "Thank you, Ben," she said. "Thank you for coming," I said. She walked out of the restaurant. I watched her go. I paid the check. I sat for a little while at the table by myself in the way I sometimes sit with assessments that aren't finished yet. Not anxious, just present with what was there and what it might mean. I drove home. I fed my neighbor's dog, which I did on weeknights while she worked late, and which had become a standing arrangement neither of us had formally discussed. I sat on the back porch of the house on Farwell Avenue in the June evening and thought about what Leah Tran had said about the text, and about the word accurate, and about the 14 months of a structure that had looked sound from the outside. I did not think about whether she would call. I thought about whether I had said the right things, whether the things I had said had been honest and had been kind, which are the only 2 standards that matter, and which I find easier to meet separately than together. I thought about Diane saying she was never sure what I actually thought. I thought about how many times I had told myself that honest meant saying less rather than more. I went to bed at 11. I fell asleep thinking about load distribution and the specific problem of weight that is applied at an angle rather than straight down, which is harder to calculate and more likely to cause unexpected failures. She texted me 9 days later. Things are calmer. I told my parents. I had the conversation with Doug that I should have had 6 months ago. I'd like to get coffee if you still want to, I replied. Saturday morning. There's a place on Monroe Street. 9 o'clock if that works. She replied, I'll be there. No dress this time. I replied, dress code is flexible. She replied with the specific kind of laugh that translates to text. I put my phone down and went back to work. We had coffee. We had it again. By the third Saturday, we had stopped counting. She told me things gradually, the way you tell someone things when you are not performing the telling, not a presentation, just information that surfaced when we were already talking about something else, and that she trusted me to receive correctly. She told me about the year she was 17 and spent 3 months afraid that something was wrong with how her brain worked. Before a doctor told her she had a sensory processing difference that was mild and manageable, and had probably made her better at her job. She told me about her mother, who she talked to every day, and who had cried for 20 minutes when Leah called about Doug, and then said, "All right, what do you need?" She told me about a child in her caseload named Felix, who was 6 years old and had started the year refusing to make eye contact, and had in May looked directly at her for the first time and said her name. She said Felix's name the way she said everything that mattered, plainly, without ornamentation, as if the weight of it was obvious and did not need announcing. I told her things in return, in the same gradual way. About my father and the framing. About Diane, and what she had said about the building I never let anyone inside. I told her this on a Saturday in August when we were at the house on Farwell because she had asked to see the renovation work, and I was showing her the kitchen, which I had stripped and rebuilt mostly by myself over 2 winters, and she had looked at the structure under the cabinets, the actual bracket work, the reinforcement at the corners, and said, "You built this like someone was going to need to count on it," and I had said yes. And she had looked at me, and I had said the thing about Diane. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she was right?" she said. "Yes." I said, and I think I understood what she was saying, and I thought understanding it was the same as changing it. "It wasn't. What changed?" she said. "You asked me to say the actual things," I said. "Not when we were in a situation that required it. Just regularly, you treat it like it's what conversation is for." She looked at me. "It is what conversation is for," she said. "I know that now," I said. She put her hand on the kitchen counter, her hand on my hand. "I spent 14 months," she said, "not saying the actual things, because the actual things were going to cost me something, and I had decided the cost was too high." She paused. A man I'd never met texted me and said no pressure, and I thought, that's what it's supposed to feel like, to be around someone you can say things to. "It was one sentence," I said. "It was the right sentence," she said. We were in the kitchen of the house on Farwell Avenue with the bracket work I had built carefully and the late August light coming in and her hand on mine on the counter, and I had been keeping something careful for 4 months, and I was done being careful about it. "I have been," I said, "since June, thinking about load distribution, about what things can actually bear and what they look like they can bear. I have been trying to accurately assess what I was feeling and not say it before I was sure it was real and not just the circumstance." I stopped. "It's real. It's not the circumstance. I've been sure for a while, and I've been waiting for the right time to say so." which is the same error I've been making my whole life in a slightly more self-aware form. She looked at me. The steady expression. But something in it had been building toward this for weeks and was now simply present. The reason I went to dinner that Saturday, she said, in that dress, in that state, wasn't only that I didn't want to be alone. It was that I had read a text from someone who seemed like someone worth knowing. And I was right. She paused. I have been falling in love with you since the restaurant. You should know that. I kissed her. Standing in the kitchen, I had rebuilt myself, in the house with the good bones, with her hand still on mine on the counter and the August evening coming in through the window. It was quiet, and it was certain, and it felt structurally sound in a way that I understood in my actual bones rather than from any instrument. She pulled back and looked at me. You renovated the entire kitchen yourself? She said. Over 2 winters, I said. The bracket work is very good, she said. Thank you, I said. I wasn't flattering you, she said. I know, I said. That's why it meant something. 14 months later, the house on Farwell Avenue has a second person in it. Leah moved in the following April, which happened in the gradual way real things happen, her things appearing in the house over several months before we said anything explicit, the way structures settle into their final position before you document them. Her occupational therapy reference books on the shelf I built in the second bedroom. The specific coffee she likes in the cabinet, where I keep coffee. A photograph of Felix that she had framed, the one from May, where he is looking directly at the camera, which she put on the kitchen windowsill the first week she moved in, and which has not moved since. She told me about Felix last month. He had started 2nd grade, and his new teacher had called Leah for a consultation about his progress. And what the teacher described was a child who was adapting, who had methods now, who knew how to ask for what he needed. Leah told me this at the kitchen table over dinner, with the expression she uses for things that confirm what she was working toward, not triumphant, just satisfied in the quiet way that real results produce real satisfaction. Marcus and his wife came for dinner in October. Marcus sat across from me at the same kitchen table and looked at Leah and looked at me and then looked at the house, at the bracket work in the kitchen. The refinished floors, the second bedroom now used for the things it was built for, and he said, in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely, I knew. He said it without heat, without pride, exactly once. He did not need to say it twice. There is a thing my father said about the framing, about the moment before the surfaces go on, when you can see exactly whether it's right. He said it made him a little sad when the surfaces went on, because you stopped being able to see the work. I have thought about that differently over the last 14 months. I understand now that the surfaces going on is not the end of knowing whether you did it right. You keep knowing. You live inside it. Every morning the floor holds correctly, and the walls are plumb, and the kitchen counters are exactly level, and none of that is visible in the usual sense, but it is continuously present, the way correct structure is present, not announcing itself, just holding. My father said the most dangerous map is the wrong map. He was a contractor, not a cartographer, and he never said that, but the idea is the same. The most dangerous structure is the one that looks sound, but isn't. The one that holds its load without failing, month after month, until someone applies real weight to it, and it goes. I have spent my career learning to tell the difference. I know what I'm standing in now. It holds. She asked me once, early in the fall, what made me send that particular text. The one about no pressure and the timing being complicated. I told her I had thought about it longer than I would admit, and that what I'd landed on was, whatever the situation was, She deserved to know she didn't owe the outcome anything, that showing up to something shouldn't require a person to already know how it ends. She was quiet for a moment. Do you know how many people would have just said, "Hey, looking forward to Saturday?" She said. Most people, I said. All of them, she said. Everyone I know would have said that. It didn't seem like enough, I said. It wasn't enough, she said. It was correct. Those are different things. I thought about that. Correct and enough. The difference between a thing that satisfies the minimum requirement and a thing that accurately addresses the actual situation. I have been in this work long enough to know that most failures happen in the gap between those two things. The bolt that meets specification but was installed at the wrong torque. The concrete that passed testing but was poured in conditions that compromised the cure. The structure that satisfies the code and doesn't satisfy the load. I sent the text I sent because the situation called for accuracy, not adequacy. She stood in a parking lot outside a wedding venue at 3 p.m. and read it and decided she was wrong to be there. I have tried to be accurate every day since. She has made that easier than I expected. Some structures hold because they were built well. Some hold because the right things were added at the right time. I'm not always sure which one this is. I think it might be both. 14 months, and I have not once walked through this house and found anything that does not hold. I do not expect that to change.